Fantastic. Okay, so we're here today with Will Fraser, who is the official candidate for the Green Party this year. Honestly, we're just having a little interview today, like get to know you, put a little bit of messaging out for the students, little video. So we've got like about 9 questions, just like general run through, little intro, kind of like what got you into politics, some student issue stuff, so like affordability, equity, student retention, also like a little bit of mental health stuff, so just a couple questions on that, about your stance and what your party's goals are looking like. And then topping it, just ending it all off with a pretty divisive question just about your go-to pizza place in Antigonish County. Yeah, gonna be a good one. So I'll let you start it off here. Like, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, just like I've got like hobbies, like maybe like hometown, family, like school-wise. Yeah, just like a little bit about yourself, Will.
Sure. So I guess first, thanks for having me.
No problem.
And I guess like before I tell you about myself, I'll just acknowledge that the interview is taking place in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So I'm from Antigonish. I've been here for 23 years now. I'm a CNVEC student majoring in history and French. I've been kind of involved in the community ever since I think I was in junior high, being involved with coaching debate teams, working with the 4-H program in the county, and more recently my work with the CNVEC Students Union, Students Nova Scotia, as well as the student newspaper, have all kind of, I guess, inspired me to become more involved in politics and have really shown me, based on my experience, kind of what's happening in this province and what works and what doesn't. I guess that's me.
Yo, 100%. And like, first off, great to meet you.
Nice to
in fuller detail. And also, thanks for the land acknowledgement. That's fantastic. So, like, on that end, like, I can really see like how like some of your experiences pushed you towards like a little bit of a political life. But would you say like what was the main driving force that really got you into politics and wanting to get this going?
Sure, so I guess I was kind of involved in politics for, 7 or 8 years now, just being on a number of campaigns, being, I guess, vaguely aware of what was happening. But I think what really pushed me is, we're at a time right now where there's a convergence of a bunch of different crises happening not only in Nova Scotia but all around the world. You've got a housing crisis, a climate crisis, a healthcare crisis, an economic crisis, and we're in a global pandemic still. These types of things, I think, have shown us that more than we already knew, things weren't working. I don't think they were working before, but they certainly don't work now. And I think that was really what pushed me to get involved. It's time for some real structural change. Policy change isn't sufficient anymore to deal with everything that's happening. We really need to look at the core of everything we're doing.
Yeah. So it was like a bit of a call to action, like seeing that there's changes that need to be made, and like entering that to really like bring that to the table and bring those ideas forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Just seeing everything that's happening right now should be a driving force for everybody to become more aware and become more involved in the government.
Fantastic. Love that answer. And that kind of leads me into my next question, kind of along the lines of, like there are several different crises going on, issues that we're seeing within like different populations, different sectors of society. So specifically, like there's definitely a number of key issues that are facing Nova Scotians and our youth, like in particular. So this election season, what do you see as the largest challenges for the youth?
So for young people in particular, I think there are probably 3 main things. I think number 1, the healthcare crisis in Nova Scotia disproportionately impacts young people. Most young people who either come here or just have been here their whole lives are more likely to lose a family doctor, are less likely to get onto that waiting list. They're often deprioritized when it comes to healthcare. And also we know that young people are more likely to face mental health struggles, particularly when they develop during adolescence. Mm-hmm. So the lack of affordable and accessible mental health care and healthcare generally is a big issue. Mm-hmm. The second one would be the climate crisis. We're the ones who are going to have to live with the climate 50 years down the road, even 20 years down the road. Our futures are completely at stake depending on how we address global warming, how we address pollution. I think that's the big issue for young people. But finally, I think access to education is a really big problem. Young people should be able to access whatever kind of education they think, is best going to suit them in the future. They shouldn't be put off by cost, by inequity, by anything really that makes it inaccessible for them. I think those are probably the three main election issues that I've heard from young people.
That's fantastic, and honestly, I think a good summary of like some issues that are impacting youth, like in this province and in this country as a whole. So, like especially on your last point there, in terms of like affordability and access to education. So on that side, yeah, like definitely affordability of education is one of the largest challenges that we're seeing for youth in the province today. And like I'm just looking for like what are some of the ways in which you and your party would look to like support students to ensure that like those financial barriers are not what's impacting their academic success.
Sure. So I guess the first thing I would point to is something that it doesn't only target students, but the Green Party of Nova Scotia will introduce a guaranteed livable income, starting between $18,000 and $19,000 and going up from there. This really does alleviate a lot of the economic strain put on young people and put on Nova Scotians generally.
Right.
Your ability to not worry about putting food on the table, not worry about paying rent, really does free up a lot of money for you as an individual. But then specifically when it comes to higher education, there are three policy points that I think are really important.
Okay.
First of all, we want to increase access to high-quality apprenticeships in Nova Scotia. Individuals who want to pursue the trades that don't need to go through a formalized education system like college or university deserve access to be able to stay here and get that education from a qualified mentor.
Right.
Secondly, looking at the Nova Scotia community colleges, we want to immediately eliminate tuition fees for NSCC. Nova Scotia should be able to stay here. It's all kind of the same point. You should be able to get your education here and start a family here.
Right.
And then finally, looking at universities, there's a couple of things we want to do. Something we can do immediately is convert all Nova Scotia student loans that have currently been given out to non-repayable grants, and also only giving out non-repayable grants going forward. This means that students don't end up being burdened by, $40,000, $50,000 in debt post-undergrad.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier for an individual to pursue university when that sticker cost is lower. And we do eventually want to move to a system where all post-secondary education in the province is free for everybody, domestic students, international students, out-of-province students. Those are really the main ways in which we can look at affordability as a factor when it comes to access.
Oh, 100%. And like great answers. I think that all three of those policy points are ways in which you can really like tackle that financial barrier, which we're really seeing coming to the forefront for a lot of students in this time. And it kind of like going off a lot of what you were saying in terms of the key issues that we're facing the youth. Like I really liked how you touched on mental health. I already had it down as a question because mental health support is a pressing issue for students and youth. And also like we're seeing that mental challenges are being exacerbated, either new or already pre-existing but worsening conditions in a lot of students due to COVID-19 and many other things. So my question for you is just in your opinion, like what are some of the ways in which government can ensure that mental health of youth is prioritized and also Nova Scotians at the same time?
Sure. So there's a few things in our platform related to ensuring mental health access. The first one I would say is that we want to create and improve upon current mental health services to make them, one, universally accessible. You should not have to pay to get mental health services because mental health is health. You don't need to pay to see a family doctor. You shouldn't need to pay to see a therapist. You shouldn't need to pay to see a psychiatrist. Secondly, we really need to look at these programs and make sure that not only are they accessible financially, but also that they're culturally responsive. People from different communities, from different backgrounds, need different kinds of support when it comes to mental health. Without that, responsive support, they are less likely to seek out help, and that help is less likely to benefit them even when they do seek it out.
Right.
But one of the major things we're seeing with access to mental health care in Nova Scotia is, one, either just the long wait times, or two, just the inability to access it generally. So we want to decrease those wait times in a few ways. One, we want to recruit more mental health professionals. In the same way we've had a big emphasis on recruiting physicians, we should be recruiting therapists, psychiatrists.
Okay, yeah.
But also a problem that we've had in terms of accessing it is we have a very siloed off system of healthcare in Nova Scotia. So your family doctor is separate from your optometrist. Your optometrist is separate from your dentist. They're all separate from your psychiatrist. We want to create incentives for community clinics and healthcare centers to kind of integrate all of these services. So if you go to a family doctor, you don't need to get a referral and then wait 6 or 8 months to get into a mental health professional. We really want to bring all of these services together so that they're more accessible, not only in a timely manner, but just being able to get to them is a big factor.
That's fantastic. So like really, so in at the highest level, like really one, like making sure that there's more attention and like support for mental health like physicians, and also like just making sure that those supports are available. And then secondly, just like a new idea to make sure that mental health services are accessible, and also like for a third point, making sure that they're culturally accessible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's fantastic. So like also touching on another one of the key issues that you're speaking on, and also kind of falls into the affordability and the work integrated learning side of things, and it's about like outmigration. So we've seen like a lot of students in Nova Scotia, and that outmigration of students after they finish their degree does like remain a concern, especially for like the young people who are leaving to find that job because they might not be able to here. So I'm just wondering, like as a province, what do you think? Like how can we better support and incentivize students to stay here after their degree? And I know you brought up some good points with NSCC, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you can.
Sure. So there's a few things related to outmigration, particularly for young people. I think there are two major driving factors behind outmigration. One is access to work, and not just work generally, but I think a fulfilling career. If we don't have an industry that suits your education, that doesn't suit what you kind of worked for 4 or 5 or 6 years, there's really no reason for you to stay. But secondly, I think it's about access to services. If you can't get a doctor in Nova Scotia, but you can get a doctor in Ontario, it makes more sense for you to move to Ontario as a young person.
Fair enough, yeah.
So I think the way we address outmigration is a few things. One, I think just improving access to services in Nova Scotia. If you can access a doctor, if you can actually live here and survive in Nova Scotia, I just think you're more likely to stay. People want to be here, particularly those who have grown up here, but even those who come here from other provinces to study. Nova Scotia has vibrant communities. We have, a welcoming atmosphere. I think people want to be here, but they can't justify it due to the lack of services. But then secondly, when it comes to, finding a job, I think the reason Nova Scotia has such a problem when it comes to, a lack of opportunities in certain fields is because our economy struggles due to poverty. I think the alleviation of poverty, particularly with a guaranteed living income, allows you to have more liquidity within the market. You have more money flowing, which encourages more entrepreneurs to start businesses, which then in turn opens up more spaces for individuals to start their careers.
Right.
So I think it's really addressing those root issues, which then, alleviate the symptoms that cause
Right.
migration.
So yeah, really just targeting the healthcare and secondly, affordability side of things.
Absolutely.
And then the access to work within the province.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then my last question really kind of falls into like the equity side of things.
Sure.
So we know that COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted some groups over others and further exacerbated existing inequalities like in our society that were already pre-existing. So what kind of policies, like if any, will you and your party pursue just to promote social and racial justice in our communities?
Sure. So I think there's a few things we need to do. The first and foremost is we need to implement all of the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There are, I think, 20-something outstanding that we haven't done as a province yet, and then even more that individual institutions haven't done. I think for the province, we need to make sure that, one, we are implementing these calls to action, but secondly, one of our policy platforms is we want to make sure that every single law in Nova Scotia is compliant with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples before 2025. So within the first term, we're going to make sure all of our laws are responding to the human rights concerns of Indigenous people. But then for institutions, if they don't have the money to, implement these calls to action, the province needs to be there and step up to provide a more equitable space. But outside of that, I think also looking at the struggles of African Nova Scotians, looking at things like environmental racism, where African Nova Scotian communities are disproportionately impacted by things like pollution being in certain areas and communities, or lack of access to services that are, again, culturally responsive. I think really engaging with stakeholders from these communities, it's not the place of the provincial government to tell them what they need. The job of the provincial government is to listen and then provide. So I think talking to marginalized communities, listening to their leaders, I don't think they've been shy about telling us what they need. I think we just haven't provided that. So I think taking action based on those recommendations and really kind of centering justice as a whole, particularly racial justice in our work, is really important.
That's a fantastic answer, and 100%, like, the calls to action, I believe that's a fantastic point and something that is incredibly powerful and should be, like, would be fantastic to see. And at the same time, like, also that leading from behind piece and making sure that you're listening before you're allocating, also a fantastic point. So yeah, I think that that's definitely something to keep in mind as, like, parties continue to pursue that kind of justice in our community.
For sure.
And, like, just a shorter little question for you, and more of just like a bit of a statement, is like, what would your message be to students in this community and all over Nova Scotia really that are showing up to the polls?
Yeah, I think the very first thing would just be show up. It doesn't matter who you're going to vote for. You deserve to vote. You deserve to have your voice heard when it comes to government decisions, and you really won't be able to do that unless you make yourself heard at the ballot box. A lot of, I guess, older adults have the idea that young people don't care about politics, they don't care about government. That's untrue, and we know it. But the way we prove that is by showing up to vote. The demographic data after the election will show that. Politicians will be forced to listen to young people more just if you vote. But the second thing is, when you do go to vote, I think really ask yourself, who is investing in my life? Are you looking for somebody who's going to invest in you 10, 20 years down the road? Are you looking for investment now? And that's the question each individual is going to have to answer. But I would just encourage young people to, get informed, talk to your candidates, and ask questions. But the most important thing is just go vote.
Love it. That's awesome. And, like, just to finish off on a nice note, love to hear about what your go-to pizza place is in Antigonish County.
So this is going to be controversial.
Okay, love it.
I think I'm a Kenny's guy.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I do have to say though, depending on the circumstances, there's nothing that beats Will garlic fingers. So I guess I'll take the political answer and say Kenny's for pizza, Will for garlic fingers.
Nice, you just hit all the bases.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so that's all the questions that we have for you today, but Will, just wanted to say thank you very much for coming in, putting this information out there for the students. I know everybody's going to really enjoy seeing the fact that our candidates are taking stances on these issues and also providing answers that are going to inspire different sectors of our student population. So I think that's fantastic, and I just want to say thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, thanks.